morning or afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this call. We appreciate your attendance. I would like to go ahead and dig right in. Looks like we have some people that are still connecting with audio. So I'll just do some quick introductions to this. We've asked the folks here with IHE who have been helping us prepare for moving NEMSIS version 3.5 into the realm of information exchange with standards outside of NEMSIS. And a part of that process has been renewing a number of products that NEMSIS maintains for connectability through HL7 or through IHE now, and just including multiple paths for people to be able to connect to other healthcare data to help our providers to understand how best to care for their patients and to also be prepared to be able to understand their outcomes to improve performance. And of course, getting our patient care information to the hand of healthcare providers after we hand off the patients. So lots of use cases here. Really pleased to have IHE here today to talk about some of the future work that we want to continue to do to help folks more efficiently exchange data, particularly as we move towards new standards like the HL7 FHIR standard and other Cures Act related standards and obligations that we'll be facing in the near future. So pleased to have two folks with us to present today. Adam Baser, who is a senior technical manager on informatics and healthcare IT standards with HIMSS, is going to be doing the bulk of the presentations. And I'll cue in the vendors and state participants here, states who are working with HIEs within their states. We will be talking about a model that we'd like to move forward with in 2022 called the path to production, kind of a tailored product and tailored process for vendors or for others who wish to move a standard forward with version 3.5 and using FHIR or some other mechanism. Adam will talk about this process of a path to production. He, in his role at HIMSS, he leads the operationalizing HIMSS work and standards adoption through the direct support through IHE USA and the Global Consortium for eHealth Interoperability. Also, Andrea Forquet, who most of us are familiar with. She's done a number of presentations on our V3 implementation calls. She's also with us. She's a health informatics consultant with eHealth Sign. And her role, she focuses on supporting products related to public health, clinical and patient care, and standards development. Andrea is the chair for two IHE domains, the patient care coordination and the quality research and public health groups. And she's helped us with 3 profiles so far related to sharing NEMSIS data across the healthcare continuum. So Adam, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Right, thank you. Appreciate that introduction. And on behalf of Andre and myself, I'd like to thank everybody for this opportunity. Looking forward to speaking with you about a little bit about integrating the Healthcare Enterprise USA, our 2022 Path to Production digital series, and how IHE USA can help support your organization's interoperability goals. And while the data exchange issues that IHE deals with every day may be complex, at the core, the work that IHE does is simple. To connect people together, we need to share information so we can solve common problems together. So IHE is both a global community and a shared technological framework. The two go hand in hand in supporting the development of interoperability global goods that are designed to close the communication gaps between computer systems to improve their interoperability. IHE has a global footprint. Integration profiles underpin the National Health Exchange of the US, the European eHealth Network, and open source and commercial projects across the world. Our technical frameworks standards profiles, and testing methods and tools are offered as a freely available global good resource to the international community. IHE was established by HIMSS and RSNA back in 1998. It's some of these awesome 1990s fashions and the early photos can attest to. The goal of IHE when it was first conceived was to increase standards adoption and help decrease the costs for providers of health IT integration. IHE, through its integration profiles, its virtual and in-person events, and its global community of volunteers, offers provider organizations a simple way to evaluate the interoperability functionality of products, as well as market suppliers a unique method for connectivity testing and for removing barriers to integration that would otherwise often need to be addressed on-site at a customer's expense. Our organization and process have been put into practice and we have delivered results for over 20 years now. But what we are doing, what the industry is doing, it's not enough. We all know this. We recognize that there are still gaps, silos, voices that have not yet been invited to the table or heard. And we are focusing our attention to those areas in 2022 where we feel we must make progress and advance. So when thinking about IHE USA, we'd love for you to think of IHE USA as a national health IT implementation collaborative, one that provides health IT developers, clinicians, and policymakers a shared, stable, and structured environment for harmonize the practical interoperability of their health IT products and policies. IHE supports this harmonization through digital and in-person events, including the Path to Production digital series, our North American Connectathon, which is the world's largest, longest running interoperability testing event, and customized projectathon events. It does so through IHE's virtual testing platform, Gazelle, and our MELD developer sandbox. Through concierge testing partner matching services, a health IT developer-focused workforce development, and access to a health IT knowledge base that's tailored for product developers' needs. Organizations that formally participate in the Path to Production with IHE receive a number of benefits, including a roadmap to adoption. IHE's testing and product development platform uses an ISO-recognized adoption process to improve our customers' ability to move their product implementation guide or standard from development to market adoption. Additional support with testing partner relationship management. IHE's concierge test partner matching service helps small firms gain access to testing partners for their products and helps large firms streamline its test partner relationship management activities. Through connecting impactful stakeholders together to take action. IHE standards adoption and acceleration events bring together key technical, governance, and policy stakeholders to make actionable progress resolving urgent healthcare needs. IHE helps to reduce its customers' product development costs by providing access to a global network of testers at the world's largest, longest running, and most rigorous interoperability testing event, where again, opportunities to fix issues and solve problems can happen in a matter of minutes that would otherwise take days of expensive on-site testing. And finally, it helps inform your organization's product development process with IHE and HIMSS subject matter expertise. IHE USA helps the product development workforce stay up to date on current and emerging topics through access to IHE and HIMSS's knowledge base to help understand the technical, governance, and policy factors that are impacting your product development cycle and overall health IT product interoperability. Another benefit to formally participating is the opportunity to be part of a cohort, one that will accelerate pilot projects and adoption of health IT, of standards-based health IT, excuse me. So I'm going to turn the call over to my colleague, Andrea, who's going to talk through some specific FHIR-based IHE resources and provide a little more information about one of those profiles.
Hello, everyone. So there are some existing FHIR-based resources that IHE has that can support the projects or use cases that many of you may have, and to help accelerate your goals. So we have the paramedicine care summary, which is the standard that maps out the information flow between the ambulance and the hospital. It gives the hospital a few options for consuming specific EMS data elements for things like quality research and reporting. There's the referral for interfacility patient transport, which is a document that is able to provide an EMS team or transport team with the patient information that is needed for interfacility transport. And then there's the quality outcomes reporting for EMS, otherwise known as the core, which would enable hospitals to report the information that was received from the PCS. And then also it gives the capability of the EMS company to query and ask for the outcome data that for the patients that were transported to them as well. Then there are other specific profiles that underpin many of these profiles, which are the MHD profiles, QEDM, and MXDE. John Murky is our specialist for these profiles. And then we have a white paper that will help inform how to connect to your local HIE and what profiles would help support those connections. Next slide. So as you can see, there are this is a use case that you can look at and see how these profiles can work together. So if you are connecting to an HIE, of course, you would use that white paper to inform how to connect, to make that connection. You could query that HIE for the internet with the International Patient Summary, which is a reduced, skinny version of a patient essential information. Then we have the paramedicine care summary that would be sent from the ambulance to a hospital. And it could even be sent to other transport companies if that's what you needed to do as well. Then the hospital would be basically the center of that core transaction. So they could send the measure report data to an HIE, and the EMS organization can actually query the HIE for some of that core information, or the hospital can send it to the EMS organization. Additionally, the EMS organization can also query the hospital for this information. So it's a very flexible profile for multiple situational transactions. Next slide. And there's another profile that has been going on in IHE called the 360X profile. This is a continuous care planning, including referrals that hospitals are trying to take on. And recently there was a change proposal to include the RIPT profile, the referral for interfacility patient transport profile, to set up interfacility transports, emergency or routine, or even if you want to think of a provider setting up a routine transport for a dialysis patient, they would send the RIPT information to the EMS company as well ahead of time, so that they can have that patient information prior to pickup or on scene for pickup. Then then we continue similar to the previous pattern to the paramedicine care summary to the hospital or to the receiving facility, and then the different ways that you can utilize the core to get that information out for quality reporting for both the NEMSIS requirements and some like national trauma registries, heart attack registries, etc. So as you can see, these profiles are flexible in your uses and in the use case, and a part of this is to show you how to use these profiles, and you may not even be limited to these profiles in your goals as well. And I will pass this back to Adam for continuing this presentation.
Thanks, Andre. I appreciate you going into some detail in regards to a number of our profiles that speak to the needs of the folks on the call. And thank you for highlighting our John Murphy and his work as well. He's on the call. If there are any questions on those particular profiles, he'd be happy to answer any of those questions. But let's talk a little bit about IHE USA's Path to Production digital event series. We've got two major goals in regards to the Path to Production series. We're looking to bring together stakeholders for shared progress. Our mantra as we work through the Path to Production is actionable progress around shared themes and discrete use cases. What can we move forward through 2022 and 2023 and beyond? The second goal is to provide implementation guidance. We understand that stakeholders are at all sorts of different levels of maturity in regards to their interoperability goals, and that everyone has they may not have the same goals. What the Path to Production event series is designed to do is to support organizations where they're at and help them move through a process guided around standards adoption that can help us all move solutions and best practices from concept to adoption. Actionable progress and adoption are, if there are two phrases to remember from today, actionable progress around Path to Production, it's actionable progress and moving items to adoption. So for our Path to Production series, we will provide free attendance for the event, for the first event, and then there will be nominal fees for additional events. We will also have testing services available for purchase as well. The logistics around the event, the Path to Production digital series will be taking place on a roughly bi-monthly basis. It'll consist of 2 half days of programming, understanding that we all, there are only 24 hours in the day, and we want to be able to be cognizant of the important work that you're doing. And so again, providing 2 half-day events, on-demand education, as well as live keynotes and panel discussions. There'll be opportunities for workshop and more hands-on activities within the MELD Health IT sandbox, as well as opportunities for demonstrations. And we'll be reaching out as organizations formally participating in the Path to Production. We'll be reaching out on a regular basis to check in and make sure that the momentum that's built out of the activities at our bi-monthly events to make sure we can continue to support that throughout the year. And so just a little bit about the Path to Production. We want to provide a high-level overview. Obviously, there are more details in each of these phases than these few words speak to, but hope that this gives a general idea of the process that we'll be moving through throughout the year. In phase 1, which we'll be focusing on this January, our goal is to really bring people together to define the problem. Are we describing what are the interoperability problems each organization that we're facing collectively? Are we describing them in the same way? Are we using the same words? Working with the cohort of participants to build consensus and around the defining the problems that we face. As we move into phase 2, we start to look at the impact that those problems have from a technological, from a operational and governance level and policy as well. As we move into phase 3, when we start to think about potential solutions to resolve these problems, working through the business case, making sure that as part of the road to adoption, that we can clearly define the business case for that solution, both for internal stakeholders and to the wider market. Phase 4 is build. It's one short word. It's got a lot of activity behind it. But in phase 4, we'll be providing resources and helping to support activities as it relates to building out the solutions and best practices that we're seeking. As we move into phase 5, we move into, as we work towards greater adoption, we move into that phase of taking that solution and testing it at IHE Connectathon, which again can take place both virtually and in person. And then moving into phase 6, working towards a demonstration of the solution and a pilot implementation. We really look forward to you joining us on the path to production as we work together to move your organization's interoperability goals forward and to bridge the existing classical interoperability infrastructure to a world of open API and FHIR-driven health information exchange, from problem identification to implementing practical solutions. As part of the path to production cycle in 2022, this year's theme is focused on maternal health from the personal, local, and global level. And as with other IHE USA educational events, we'll be bringing together thought leaders to achieve shared progress through our standards acceleration tracks, which focus on personal health, which looks at patient-facing and consumer applications and devices. Local health, which is focused on state-based interoperability issues and supporting requirements for the 21st Century Cures Act, and global health, which is focused on global interoperability initiatives that can be replicated with varying resource availability around the world. You can see here some of the additional areas of focus for each of these tracks, and an opportunity to register for the event series is available on the slide, which we will be sharing with this group post this call, excuse me. So I wanted to share a few examples of how stakeholders have worked with IHE USA and its processes to advance their own standards-based interoperability. So the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Centers for Disease Control and Prevention turned to IHE USA to support its Morph project. Morph stands for Making EHR Data More Available for Research and Public Health. CDC has leveraged IHE's North American Connectathon in March of 2021 to bring together 14 vendors and other public health agencies. They used the event to support balloting requirements for the CDC HL7 MedMorph implementation guide, which was then balloted in January. They also included components to test e-case reporting, health surveys, vital records, and cancer registry reporting. The MedMorph team analyzed data elements from their multiple use cases and identified elements that were used by 2 or more use cases that weren't included in the United States core data for interoperability. This enabled the MedMorph team to ballot 3 FHIR content implementation guides during the September 2021 HL7 ballot process. And the work of the MedMorph project is being considered for demonstration at the upcoming HIMSS 22 Global Conference Interoperability Showcase. An example of these principles in action the work in action that IHE has done to support cross-border data exchange can be seen through the work we've done to support the adoption of the International Patient Summary. As Andrea mentioned, the International Patient Summary is a minimal and non-exhaustive patient summary. It's specialty agnostic, condition independent, but readily usable for all clinicians for unscheduled care of a patient, looking at it through the lens of cross-border data exchange, but available to borders both local and international. The International Patient Summary Standard normalizes the data set with the European guideline on cross-border exchange of patient summary. And this data set has been widely appreciated and been taken as the basis for projects in both Europe, North America, and elsewhere. The data set is a relatively mature data set, and it currently is in its third iteration, with previous iterations in 2013, 2016, and 2020. IHE USA helped to advance this implementation-ready standard through the alignment and of development and testing activities across multiple Connectathons and conference events in 2001, produced both by IHE, HL7 International, and HIMSS. IHE brought teams of volunteers from the three organizations and its network to jointly develop the required tools to test the IPS standard, integrated those tools into a virtual testing environment, and tested the IPS profile with commercial health IT developers at the IHE European Connectathon in June of 2021. So we thank you for the opportunity to share some information about IHE, its Path to Production series, and how IHE has supported organizations to achieve their interoperability goals. And now we'd love to hear from you. How can IHE USA best support actionable progress on the interoperability challenges your organization faces and the wider EMS community in 2022? What education topics would be helpful for us to focus on to meet your needs? What technological resources can we help support the development of? What testing tools can we help to develop? And who are the testing partners that we can help bring together to help support your needs? And Clay, can I turn this back to you to help facilitate our conversation?
Yeah, that would be great, Adam. Thank you for presenting. This is incredibly valuable. I'll kind of prime folks a little bit. I've got a couple of questions that I wanted to kind of ask Adam, if that's okay. First off, you described that I got a great tool that indicated, right, that you could take a use case, and then here's each of the phases that you go through with that use case to develop it, to define it, to build it, and to actually test it, which is fantastic. But I'll bet maybe the state audience that's on this call versus a street level EMS product that's on this call, they may have different use cases that they're most interested in. So what will happen if more than one use case wants to enter this path to production?
Thank you, Clay. That's a great question. So the way that I would suggest from a visual standpoint, as we're looking at this particular single use case, imagine the path to production aligned with multiple of these use case cycles lined up one on top of each other. So visually, we'll be looking at a number of different use cases. We'll be going through all of those individual use cases with the same approach in terms of talking about phase one across all of those use cases at the same time. phase 2, all of the different use cases at the same time. So we'll be moving cohorts along on a similar timeline, but the use cases themselves, we look forward to participants speaking to those use cases that are most important to them, and how we can then build around that the approach that is described visually here. I hope that spoke to your question.
Yeah, Adam, thank you very much. That was incredibly helpful. And kind of a related question. We have a great set of state folks on this call, as well as some great vendors on this call. So really, thank you for attending. We've got a great mix of folks here. But I could see, for example, the state folks, maybe Peter from Oregon, as an example. They have, of course, strong interest in making sure that EMS data can be shared across their state. They have kind of a wider view, and maybe even within their state, they have a state IHE, right, that they want to make sure EMS can participate in. So they may be very interested in this path to production process through phase 1 through 3, right? They'd like to make sure the business case is well understood within their state, but they won't be building, right? So they won't be building or testing, but so they want to be highly engaged in certain phases of this. Is there a way for people to be, like highly engaged for some phases, but feel comfortable kind of dropping off with others? Does that make sense?
I believe I understand what you're saying, and we do. With as we all know, with any of these use cases, there are multiple stakeholders involved throughout the process from concept to adoption, and that their value add comes at different points within that process. And our hope is that the path to production allows that kind of flexibility that you're describing. While the opportunity to keep to build around a cohort together, focused on a specific use case, to keep that cohort informed and cohesive throughout the process, but to be able to have stakeholders participate in the spaces within the path to production that speaks to their passions and their priorities.
I wanted to jump in as well on the question about the phases. One of the things we're trying to do is recognize that the business as usual isn't working, right? So we're trying to reimagine the process, and so this picture that you're looking at could be a multi-year process. Really, we can't fit everything in a 12-month cycle, right? So that's part of what we're trying to do: break it up throughout the year and put it into a potentially multi-year cycle where it makes sense, because we can't be everything to everyone. Yet we know there's opportunities to make some progress. So we do believe there's going to be folks that are at different levels of readiness, that it makes sense to work really hard from a phase 1 to 3, pause, maybe assess, and then move on, or figure out what the next steps are to move on to the next phase. But the idea is you'll be able to pop in and pop out based on your individual progress, but the goal is to make consistent progress.
Thank you, Amit. Incredibly valuable. Yeah, and would love to have additional questions. I did want to add just a little bit of context. Wanted to make sure the folks on the call knew that the standards that were mentioned that Andrea Forquet has been working on, we have been. She has to balance a couple of needs, right? There's an international audience as well as a national audience here. So we've been working with her just over, the last kind of 7 or 8 months to ensure that NEMSIS version 3.5 is well represented in those profiles. And so there's good representation there. And then of course the new standards under the 21st Century Cures Act for us to move to FHIR and to be regulated under that standard. So clearly this is an opportunity NEMSIS partners to look at an ability to work together to move towards some standardized interoperability. So open it up to other questions related to participation in the path to production cycle.
I know I personally have missed out on a bunch of the meetings since all this started up. Is there a official NEMSIS project or mapping from 3.5 to FHIR, or is there a path there where, basically what I'm thinking about is something going directly from the NEMSIS XML to FHIR resources through a mapping engine. So is there a set of documentation or a standard from NEMSIS that says, field 2.3.5 equates to patient dot whatever?
Yeah, Andre, do you want to speak to that, Andre? I think the profiles that you've worked on.
Yes. So in those profiles that were shown, there are mapping tables that have the NEMSIS reference code. So it'd be like e-disposition dot like O2, it'll equal like this naming. So this is going to be wrong because it's just off the top of my head, but it's like this will equal encounter date time, right? And then encounter, that's like the name of the data element that's standard throughout the systems. And then it'll say, okay, in FHIR, you'll find this in, composition.encounter.timex.datetime. And so it'll give those mappings in those standards, and they have each of them. Yeah, the mapping is in every one of the, the core, the RIPT, and the paramedicine care summary. And they also include CDA mappings as well. So yeah, it should include those. There's going to be an updated version when, at the point of the FHIR build coming out, because that's going to have a very much more specific mapping within it. But yeah, there are mappings there. And if you want to give me feedback on those mappings, if it doesn't look right, if it feels wrong, that can be updated easily. Just let me know.
Yeah, Chad, great question. And I'll also just mention to the audience that we'll make these slides available after the call. So all the hyperlinks associated to these profiles and other tools will be available to you to be able to access easily.
And this is Josh Legler. I think, I'd love to see a point we can get to where we could essentially just have an XSL transform that takes in an NEMSIS XML and spits out something in FHIR or, HL7 v3 CDA or something, or both really, because then you'd have something almost plug and play. You'd still have to work the connections with your partners, but you'd at least have the data layer taken care of.
Actually, Josh, Microsoft's Azure has a HL7 converter that they are providing to the community if you're using their Azure HL7 FHIR service. And that is based off of what are called liquid templates. And those templates are editable and can be massaged and played around with. So one of the things I was thinking about trying to do if I ever get some time is seeing if I can adopt that from the XML, because it can handle CDA natively. So the CDA versions are baked in. So that may be a shorter path to conversion. If you could just imagine a state taking a database full of their XMLs, the raw XML, feeding that directly into that converter, and then having that deposited directly into a FHIR database, then you've got a built-in playground there. Boom, done. And that may be something that's doable within that structure through Microsoft.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that info.
This is John Murky. On that particular subject, we've done this is from an IHE perspective. We've had some other projects that wanted to go to implemented transforms. So a step beyond, hey, here's the specification. And we supported that, and they ended up producing a parallel open source implementation in a couple of different platforms. So that's a very very good additional work when people want to do that. It's great because it also helps prove that the specification is complete, and you kind of do them in parallel. You can kind of get checks and balances, and in so doing, you end up as well with a set of examples in the 2 or 3 different flavors that you're able to transform between. So when somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to see what the FHIR XML looks like. Oh, that's this one over here. Oh, and when you translate that into CDA, what does it look like? Oh, that one transforms into this CDA. So that's exceptionally good. And we've supported that with some other projects. It just takes, work, people piling in and doing the work.
John, thank you. Thank you for that context. Really appreciate you sharing that.
And
Other
real quick, with the scenario that Chad described, right? I see. So one of the things with the concept of the path to production is whether we're talking to the EMS community or behavioral health community or maternal health, or there's so many different niches where I see some of the same common pain points, right? And so this, you mentioned Microsoft and being able to put up a service to support this kind of conversion and connection. So one of the things that makes me think is what can we do, collectively to kind of raise the visibility to get that extra support, whether it's from Microsoft or whoever else, so that we can have these kinds of reference implementations or services available for the community. That's what ultimately I'd like to do as part of Path to Production, to really bring us all together as a community, identify specific requirements, needs, challenges. So this is one, Chad, you just mentioned one. Could we get this set up and available for more folks in the next 3 months? I think, I'll stop there. But I'd love to use my bully pulpit at HIMSS if we can to bring some of these folks in.
I actually, if you shoot me an email, I have contacts. I'm a Azure consultant, and I just went through a Microsoft Healthcare certification course in December, focusing on their FHIR stuff. And my company is not involved in EMS. We're a pure play Azure technology company, and I have contacts within Microsoft Healthcare, and I know that this would be something that, positioned correctly, and Microsoft would probably be interested in trying to grow this market out. Particularly, really one of the places where I think it's really fascinating is with the pushes that Microsoft is doing within their cloud for healthcare. One of the places that there's a natural fit here for EMS is with their Teams care coordination programs, and with the video conferencing and all the things that are available from within Teams. So if you can imagine that connection, being something that agencies could roll into their ET3 programs or anything else, where you could have a live connection and then have the record of that and have that data be flowing bidirectionally, that's the kind of use case that's going to get Microsoft's attention. And they'll certainly have the resources to try to maybe work on some of those liquid templates because they built it to begin with, and be able to push some of that stuff through. So I definitely think that that's something that NEMSIS should be investigating. I just happen to work with Microsoft and be a partner of theirs. So I think that that's certainly a route that they may be interested in.
Thank you so much. I'll follow up with you on that topic, but this is exactly why we wanted to pull together a cohort in a group. Folks that have been, tired of waiting for progress to happen. Let's will it to happen this year.
So one of the things we're also looking for this group is additional information of like what you would like to see if you were to participate in this program on those calls, right? So if you were to come to those calls, what would you be most interested in seeing? Like, you want information on how to use tools? Do you need to have like sessions where we can help you do some of the FHIR build or pre-testing sessions, et cetera? We're looking for some input to help build out something maybe more personalized for all of you. So we can actually really help you with these goals instead of just having like a template service. We like to make it more personalized, I think.
Andrea, this is Adam. Thank you for bringing that up and that hope to speak to the personalized needs of both the organizations on this call and the EMS community as a whole. We understand if folks may want some time to marinate on that thought and to connect back with their organization as you consider what your interoperability challenges are this year and to support how we can help it. But you know, if there is are there any other thoughts in terms of you know, key challenges, maybe from a state-based level or otherwise that we should be thinking about as we develop customized resources for the EMS community?
Yeah, Adam, since we've got the time, I'm just going to chime in here a little bit. I think we probably do need a little bit of time to kind of think about this. We'll ensure that this is a close to standing option and topic in our V3 implementation calls. See if maybe we can organize the EMS community a little bit around our NEMSIS calls to garner and maybe develop a cohort of people that could be real interested here. I don't want to like put folks on the spot here. I know days are very busy, but I wondered, Ann or Amber or others that are on the call from states, are there specific requirements from your state side? I feel like we have a pretty linear idea, or I have a pretty linear idea of like how vendors, okay, we want to play in this interoperability space, or we're playing now, we've just got to update to FHIR. Here's an opportunity for us to just take that linear path and do that development and do that build and do that test. But from the state perspective, I think for you, the landscape is a little bit more complex, right? Either there's regional HIEs or a state level HIE, or you just want, you know, you've got hospitals or EMS agencies that are begging for this ability to share data or receive data. Are there educational topics or resources or things that kind of just spring to mind that we should probably be thinking about when you're thinking about that larger landscape of not just within a product, but you're trying to make a state work together and have interoperability across your state? Are there topics we should be thinking about?
This is Anne. I can't think of anything that would be, you know, special or at least at this time, would need consideration. I mean, we have people at our department that work more. We have a statewide HIE that's outside of the health department, but it has all the hospitals reporting, and they might want to be connected eventually, but the people at our department. But for right now, I can't think of anything that we'd have to do differently.
Okay. And how much of your EMS industry is connected to that state HIE?
Not a large percent. Ours is the agencies are opt-in as opposed to opt-out. And a lot of them, I think the barrier has been, I think it's a federal rule. I don't think it's a state rule where patients can opt out of having their information in HIE. And our EMS agencies at least have kind of struggled with how to do that with an EMS call if the person is, unable to answer, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we have a fair amount of the larger agencies, but definitely not the majority that are participating. But all the hospitals are pretty much participating. So that's one good side.
Thanks, Ann.
I'll just piggyback. We're definitely not as far as Ann is in Arizona. This is Amber in Colorado. We have 2 different HIEs in the state. And we're still struggling to get this concept off the ground. So we have all the sort of regulatory language in place to be able to share data and have plenty of conversations with our HIEs. But I think are running into, and this is my lack of knowledge, which is why I'm here trying to learn more, has to do with varying data that's coming into the HIE from each of the hospitals that, the data aren't normalized, and trying to translate that and getting it back to EMS in a meaningful way. And again, my knowledge base is quite small, but the one suggestion, and I'm not sure if this is already happening, but would be to get our HIEs more involved in these conversations, because I think there's just maybe a lack of financial incentive to get them to build the necessary infrastructure or do the work. They talk a lot about use cases and benefits of it, and that's really how they stream up, how they come up with new ways to move their tools forward. And so it's been hard to have the conversation to argue why this is a direction we should be going without a whole lot of financial incentive, if that makes any sense.
It does, Amber.
Just to piggyback a little bit of what Amber said too, this is Ann, sorry. We definitely have a problem where from the EMS side, looking at consuming the data back into our system from the HIE, my understanding is that when the hospitals send the data into the HIE, it's not necessarily in a format, even though the HIE communicates in HL7 and that's what our system communicates with the HIE. I guess it's not always in a format that's a consumable data point, or they don't send all of the information that's requested to the HIE, or it's like, I think of it as a PDF. I'm sure it's not quite a PDF, but that's a standard where everything was sent and could be sent in different directions is super important. I know they're not using FHIR yet. I don't know. That's another thing. I don't know what people's plans would be as far as timelines to switch over to. But thanks.
One place that I think that I haven't heard discussed, and maybe the discussion's been had in other places. One of the real benefits for FHIR for you guys is going to be having a common data model and being able to query that common data model. So one query is going to be able to cover your use case across everybody that's using FHIR. So once one of the challenges that EMS has always had with getting data back out of hospitals is every hospital's on a different EMR, which is a different database, which is a different data structure. And then you've got to try to go back and pick through to write queries against that database, and the hospitals aren't going to do it because it's expensive and time consuming. So, one of the things that may be beneficial for EMS to be developing is a standardized query set for FHIR that will return the base data sets that you're looking for all of your data collection back. So that every time you query an HIE, fire is fire no matter what, right? So there may be some slight differences from implementation to implementation, but you may be able to get a common data set back using a more streamlined set of queries using the FHIR standards in pulling data out. Assuming you have an identifier that you can use to power those queries of a FHIR server. So that may be another parallel direction that folks want to move towards is having a standardized data collection method using FHIR APIs, or even developing a profile that can be implemented on the HIE side nationally, where you have this EMS data collection set, and then you have that profile that will return that data back to you within that standardized set, and then that can be processed out however you're doing your data processing. Or even have something at the national level with NEMSIS where you're bringing that in as a common data set that's collected through that process. And then that way you've got a centralized ELT process or the extract, load, and transform process for that data set, so that everybody that's using those queries are interpreting that data and putting that data into the same place in the same database, and everything is standardized and everybody knows exactly what the semantics are behind that data set. So that may be someplace that you guys want to look at as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. Good comments, and thank you to Amber and Ann as well, describing the state situation. We are at a time. Thank you so very much. This will be a continued conversation, and as I mentioned, the V3 implementation calls will be sure to see if we can develop this idea, mature this idea. And Chad, would love to have your email connection. If you could send that in the chat real quickly, would love to be able to connect with you to talk more about your some of your ideas if you'd be willing. But I do want to make sure we end on time just so folks can make other commitments. Thank you so much for your time, Adam and Andrea. Thank you so much for presenting. This was helpful today. Thank you.
Thanks all. Be well, everyone.